we're going to talk about two different topics relating to using grape juice by the Seder. The first one is if you can use grape juice instead of wine. And the second one is whether you can use concentrated grape juice from concentrate, or you have to use the natural strength grape juice that was never concentrated.
Just, what is kedim made out of?
Kedim, regular grape juice, is grape juice.
Grape juice concentrate?
Not from concentrate. No, that's not from concentrate.
They claim that there is concentrate in this.
Concentrate maybe is added in, but the juice itself is not from concentrate.
Straight from the grape.
Right.
Was
from concentrate, yes.
No, the concentrate with water, so maybe once it's water, it's not fine.
That's what we're going to talk about. Okay, we're going to get there. Okay. When we do the mitzvah dal cases, when we really do many mitzvahs that have to do with wine, like kiddush, avdal, those kind of things, the mitzvahs that they're supposed to be done with wine. If you can't use wine, there are other things that can be used instead. Okay, but those are all, in the evidence, they're way down on the list. You're supposed to use wine for all of these things. What we're going to talk about first is, so what happens if you want to use grape juice? Okay, grape juice and wine are very similar, and is that good enough or is that not good enough? In a certain sense, that shaila is much more of a modern shaila than it used to be, than it was. In the old days, it was more theoretical because grape juice couldn't last. It would spoil. You could use it, if you had grapes, if it was the right time of the year, you could make grape juice. But for most people, it wasn't realistic to have grape juice. Now we have grape juice all year round, because we have ways of preserving it. So now it's much more, for us, it's more of a shiloh. It's not such a shiloh from a long time ago. People didn't talk about it as much. But we're going to start with three Gemaras. As many of you know probably, the Gemara says babasha that a person could squeeze grapes and make kiddush for them. You just squeeze out the grapes, and that's what you're going to have grape juice. Squeeze it out, go right to the table and make kiddush on it. Okay, that's one Gemara. Then the Gemara says some psachim like this. The Gemara says you're allowed to, now it's talking about dalet kosses. It says all kinds of things about the dalet kosses, and it says you could use echad chadash ve'echad yashan. You could use new or old wine to make kiddush. Okay, we'll talk about what that means in a second. Okay, new or old wine. Well, I'll tell you now is that one shot in the Rashbam is that when it says new wine means grape juice. You squeeze it out, that's new, it just came out. That's one shot, but he says that new wine you're allowed to use that for kiddush, for the dalet kosses.
Hasn't been fermented.
Right, it's new. That's what Rashbam says. It has no alcohol. You just squeeze it out and it's fresh. Rabbi Yehuda says, right after the next word from the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, tzarich sheyeh tam umar yain. That it has to have the taste and the look of wine. Okay, and the Gemara proves that it has to have the tam and the whatever Rabbi Yehuda means. We'll say what that means in a second. It has to have the tam and the mara of yain from psukim that have nothing to do with dalet kosses. Okay, it's psukim that talk about a definition of what the word yain means. Okay, what I'm saying is that the proofs have nothing to do with the Seder or the dalet kosses. It has to do with what's wine. Meaning, what he's saying has to do with kiddush and haftal and everything else. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Has to have tam or mara yain it's nothing to do with Pesach. The Gemara is talking about the Seder, but it has nothing to do, his rights have nothing to do with it. And the last Gemara we'll say for now is, a few lines later, the Gemara says, a few lines earlier, the Gemara says, it's possible to be Yotze, the dalet kosses, without being Yotze Cherus. Which is to say, when a person drinks dalet kosses, they're supposed to do it derech Cherus. They're supposed to do it in a way that shows that they're showing off that we came out of Mitzrayim and we're free and we're happy about that thing. We feel free about that. So you're supposed to do that. The drink of dalet kosses is supposed to be derech Cherus, but it's possible. The Gemara has ways of describing what you could do. It's possible that you drank the wine and it was not derech Cherus and apple picking. You're yotze anyhow. You're yotze b'diavad. You're not supposed to do that, but it's possible to be yotze b'diavad. Okay. So the Rashbam says about this Gemara that yayin chadash means that it was squeezed out and it was never allowed to ferment. It's grape juice. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda says it has to have the tam yayin. What does it mean that it has the tam of yayin? The tam of yayin means that it's alcoholic. Okay? It has alcohol in it. It's not alcohol, that's not that word. It has alcohol in it. Okay? Well, so the Rashbam says, well then Rabbi Yehuda and the other person and this other statement are arguing on each other. One says you could use even new wine. One says you could use, it has to have the tam of yayin, means it has to have alcohol in it. Well, those are opposites of each other. Okay? So the Rashbam learns that it's a machlokes in the Gemara. The Rashbam learns that it's a machlokes whether it does or doesn't have to have alcohol. Yes, no alcohol. The Rashbam learns that it's a machlokes whether it does or doesn't have to have alcohol to it. To which To which, based on that, Reb David Feinstein says in his Haggadah, well-known Haggadah called Reb David Feinstein says, it's a machlokes in the Gemara whether you have to have alcohol or not. The din is, like Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to have alcohol. At least lechatchila, you have to have alcohol to it. This is I'm going to give you two reasons why Reb David says why you should use wine and not grape juice. His first reason is the Gemara says it has to have tam yain. Rabbi Yehuda says it has to have tam yain. Rabbi Yehuda, according to the Rashbam, is arguing on the person who said you have to use you could use new wine, and therefore you should use. Excuse me. And therefore you have to use. It's preferred that you should use wine that has alcohol into it as opposed to wine which doesn't mean as opposed to grape juice. Okay.
But you still make grape and coffee.
That's correct. You make grape and coffee. Yes. Now, if you remember what I said to you is that this has nothing to do. This has nothing to do really with dalakosis. This reason it happens to be the Gemara talking about dalakosis, but Rabbi Yehuda's reason for thinking that it has to have tam yayin had nothing to do with dalakosis. It was a pasuk that he learned that from whatever. It's a pasuk. It had to do with the definition of the word wine. And Mamela, it would be for everything. It means if you want to make kiddush tonight, according to this reason, you would have to make it on wine and not on grape juice. Okay, and in fact, there's a Magen Avram who says like that. He says that there's a preference to use wine. He says a preference to such an extent. This is again not in Hilchos Pesach. The Magen Avram says there's a preference to the extent that if a person has a choice to make kiddush over wine that is older or grape juice that he make a shechion on it, how that works is not important to us. He has a choice between those two. He should prefer to make it over the old wine than over the grape juice that he has shechion on. Okay, that shows you his level of preference. Okay. However,
did they know really what grape juice was then?
What do you mean? Did they know what it was?
When you make fresh
What do you mean? When you squeeze the grape, then you have grape juice.
They didn't have a large use for it.
Okay. The questions are this. The Shulchan Aruch brings.
I think we shot for the summer the fireplace.
You want to talk about the Kaladim and everything?
No, we're not talking about a chayla or anything like that.
Right. The Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Kiddush. Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Kiddush that a person could use grape juice for Kiddush. The Gemara that we brought before in Tzorech Adam Eshkon Adam, you could squeeze grapes and make Kiddush right on it. And he, based on the Gemara that we said before, that you're allowed to do that. And he doesn't bring this member of Rabbi Yehuda that you have to use dafka wine, the wine that has alcohol to it. Okay, so one of two things. Either he holds we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda. Remember, either he's passing like the simple Gemara says about Basa. He says you could just use plain. He just says when you make kiddush again. It's not talking about alcohol. When you're making kiddush, he says you could just use and you make kiddush on it. So either he's saying that the din is not like Rabbi Yehuda. It's a machlokes in the Gemara. Either he's saying that the halach is like the Tanakama, the beginning of this brisa, or he's on a different shot. Even the Rashbam had two pshatim, and what the Gemara meant is echad chodesh echad yosh. This I told you one pshat in the Rashbam. It says there's a machlokes.
No, I'm looking at the Gemara. What's after this?
Kuf Chesem Beis. I only told you one pshat in the Rashbam. It's not at all clear that Rabbi Yehuda and the beginning of the Mishnah are arguing on each other. Okay, so according to one pshat in the Rashbam, Rabbi Yehuda is arguing and saying you have to have wine that has alcohol to it. It's not dafka that's a machlokes.
Could we just talk specifically about the Seder?
That's why I say he's not talking about the Seder because his rayas have nothing to do with the Seder. His rayas are that the word wine means the following thing. He doesn't have his rayas have nothing to do with Pesach. His raya is from a pasuk in Mishlei that talks about what describes the word wine. It has nothing to do with anything. It happens to be talking about it. I mean, you tell me. I don't see any reason why it should be like that. Also, another thing is, Rabbi Yehuda said two statements. He said it has to have tam umar yain. Okay, tam yain, according to the Rashbam, means that it has to have alcohol to it. Okay, what does mar yain mean? Okay, mar yain means that it has to have the color. It has to be red. Okay, you all know that what the din is that for the color of wine. For the color of wine, it's a preference that you should have red wine. That's true, it's a preference to have that. But if the white wine is better than that, you could use white wine. That's what the din is. You're allowed to use that. That tells us something about what Rabbi Yehuda is saying when Rabbi Yehuda says you have to have tam umar yain. Did he mean that you must have that? That's the only way that you could do it? Or did he mean that's the best way to do it? That's the most preferred way to do it? It doesn't mean, we're seeing from there that Rabbi Yehuda didn't mean you must do it like that. It means It's not the only definition of yayin, but that's the preferable way of doing yayin, is to do yayin that's yayin that's red. If you have a white wine, that's better than Seder. And for that reason, if you want to use grape juice, if there's a preference to that, then that's okay. Then that could be an okay also. It may not be the preference, but not say that it's not kosher to do. Okay, what I'm saying is, as la fuke to say is, to read in, it's a machlokes of Yehuda and the first person, the earlier member in the brisa, and therefore we pass on Yehuda that it must be, have a tam yain. I'm saying it's not so strong that it must be a tam yain, even if you want to say it. Okay, then, that's one reason that Rav David says why you have to use wine. One reason is because it's not wine, because we have to pass on Yehuda. That was one reason. His second reason is, he says over from his father, that in order to be derech cheres, in order to be yotze the cheres of drinking wine, you have to drink a very sophisticated beverage. The fancier a wine, of course, a fine wine is a much more fancier beverage than a grape juice is, and therefore, if you want to be yotze the cheres, you need to use the finer wine, which is to say, you need to use wine. Okay, so now before we go on, just on what he's talking about, just pause for a second and say like this: if the person is drinking wine, dafka because they're trying to have cheres to it, okay. There are some people who say, well, I have to drink wine because I have to have cheres, but I can't handle the wine, so they water it down, or they add grape juice to it, and they do other things to that also. And they say, but I want to make sure that I have wine, but I want to water it down. So you missed the point then. Okay, the point, if a fine wine that's watered down, that's not fine wine anymore. That's not wine anymore. So if you want to do it, that's the first reason. The first reason is because it has to have alcohol to it. Seder, you got alcohol to it. You watered it down, it's still kosher for wine if you don't water it down too much. But to say that, but if you say you want to do it because of the cheres of it, and you take a fancy bottle of wine that costs $30 and you pour in some grape juice and water into it, you have to.
If you take an $8.99 bottle, that's not cheres?
No, it is cheres. I'm saying, but you're saying is I want to do cheres.
Okay.
So it's the chashivas of the wine to it. When you start watering it down, you're
that's kosher. It's still more kosher than no kosher. I mean, the cheres is not one level.
It's not. You're not.
It's not about
whole cheres.
So you're saying if I take a fancy wine and I water it down and I put in some grape juice and some water into it, I'm better off at least than using just grape juice.
You can disagree with that. You can disagree. That whatever wine.
That's what I'm saying. You can 5% water already.
Yeah, but if you put water, forget it.
But he's saying it's not all or none. He's saying it's.
I understand, but
it could be more.
Water already makes it.
Don't put
wine kind of soda. I put 5% water.
You're right.
Don't put in water. Don't put in water.
Put in grape juice. Obviously, the shield of it.
No. You're both right. For the connoisseur, it's not true. The connoisseur says you put in grape juice, you might.
But that's it. My full-fledged 12%, $8.99 bottle also will throw in the face of me. You know, you buy some $5.
You have the $3.99 bottle.
$3.99. I'm losing $3. I got $45.
Do you look mitzad the wine, or do you look mitzad the gaffer?
We'll get into it in a second. Very good point. Yes.
One thing I understand from this whole conversation.
Yes.
The Gemara starts, I don't know where, I don't know if it's in this said that wine in those days was when you took a concentrate and you had water to it.
Yes.
How does that relate to what we're talking about?
That was, we're going to talk about that in a second, but that was to get it to its drinking strength.
Yeah, right.
That was to get it to the right strength.
Right.
In those days, getting it down to that strength was making it a good wine. If you drank it before you diluted it, it was not good. But nowadays, nowadays, if you dilute it from what we consider drinking strength, now you're ruining it. Now you're ruining it. And he's arguing about, which is fair, which is, it's true you're making it not so fancy, but it's still a lot better off than drinking the grapes. Okay, fine. But a whole number of poskim argue on this, and they say that they're not arguing per se on whether it's cheres. It's true that it's more cheres, it's more derech cheres to drink the wine. But what they really argue on is what happens if there's a person who doesn't want to drink wine. He doesn't like drinking wine. So is it derech cheres for that person to drink the wine and say l'shem mitzvahs, I'm going to be yotze the mitzvah just by drinking it? Or if for him it's actually not enjoyable, so for him that's not the cheres. The point is that he should be having derech cheres. So good, very good. So that's what it's telling him. It's telling him whether if the mitzvah derech cheres is I'll say it in different words, okay, if you'll excuse my English. Okay? It's a question if that's a subjective or an objective criteria. Okay? And it's totally in a girsa.
No, it's not that over here.
It's totally in...
Raise that on the record.
It's totally in a girsa. It's really, I think the machlokes is totally in a girsa in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, a person is tzarech liras is atzmoi, she'ilu hu yatzmoi. And the Mishnah's description of a person being shown derech cheres is he should liris esatzmai, and there's a machlokes in the girsa, what the girsa of those words are, if it's liris or laharis, and liris means that he should be acting in a way that builds within himself the feeling of chayris, and if the person wants to build within himself, that's subjective. That means for whatever for me is going to make me feel more like I'm feeling derech chayris, that's going to work. And if for me grape juice does that better than wine, then that's going to work for me. And if it's laharis means that I have to do something that shows it. I have to be putting on a show. It has nothing to do with what I feel myself. A show. And there's an objective criteria. The criteria is not what I feel like. It's what. And in the world, drinking wine is more derech chayris than drinking grape juice. Okay, so you could say your way. I'll say mine. Okay, so and a number of. I'll just tell you a number of people who argue this. There's a sefer written well before, called the Shar Mitzvah Ba'alacha, who said that he held also that the person is, it depends on what the person prefers better. And really, it comes from a Yerushalmi that you probably all know. You probably all know the beginning of the Yerushalmi. Okay, the Yerushalmi says that Rabbi Yoina would drink wine by the Seder, and his head would hurt him until Shavuos. Mm-hmm. Okay, he was so sick from drinking the wine it hurt him until Shavuos. You probably know that Gemara as saying that a person has to drink wine by the Seder, no matter what, whatever it's going to take. It's Yerushalmi. Okay, but there's a second half to the story. Okay, the Yerushalmi doesn't end over there. The second half of the story is, then they told him that if he drinks yayin mevushel, it won't hurt him. Okay, if he drinks yayin, and the reason why, well, I'll tell you what the reason is, because if you drink yayin mevushel, when you cook wine, the alcohol evaporates out. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. The alcohol evaporates out. So if he drank wine that was mevushel, they told him your head won't hurt. So he said, it's better that I should drink yayin mevushel, which is not the preferred wine. It's better to not drink yayin mevushel. And he says, it's better to drink the less preferred wine in order to have the chayris. Okay, so what he did is he says, even everybody knows the first part of the story, that he used to drink in a way that hurt his head all the way till Shavuos. But you see from here that if a person has a choice, should he drink the wine that's theoretically preferred, or the one that he prefers, he should drink the one that works better for him, that for him works better. So for this person, sounds like a lot of people that we know, maybe their heads don't hurt till Shavuos, but a lot of people say, if I'm going to drink this wine, I'm going to feel horrible, or I can't stand wine, or other things like that, of the more modern, Pepsi generation. Okay, there are different kinds of people who don't like wine. So for them to say, that's what the Yerushalmi says. The Yerushalmi said, he stopped drinking it. He stopped drinking the wine. So
it's different over there because even if I'm showing another person, I can't tell the difference when I look at wine if it's mavushal or not mavushal. I might be able to tell the difference between something that's grape juice and wine. But to wine, I wouldn't know if it's mavushal or not unless it said it on the bottle. So maybe in that case would be different because even if it's La Rosso, it's just going to have to be that.
That's because you're saying that because when you look at a bottle of wine, you can't tell the difference because of the way we are mabashal wine nowadays. That's because what we do nowadays. But in those days, there was a big difference.
You could tell.
I don't know if you could tell by looking at it. I don't know. That I can't tell you. But I don't know if you could tell the difference between white grape juice and white wine if I just put them into cups. I don't know if you could tell that either. But if you tasted it, you would tell the difference. And the Gemara doesn't say what the difference is. But if I'm right, that the difference is that it had no more alcohol to it, then you'd be able to tell pretty quickly when you tasted it. No, but maybe that's the point. Okay. And it's
the initial that had no alcohol.
Well, the reason why, if you want, I'll tell you. The reason is it's very simple. Okay. The reason is very simple because when alcohol gets to 173 degrees, it evaporates. So if you're mavashal the wine, the Yerushalmi doesn't say how they mavashal or how when you're right. If you're mavashal for a second, you won't lose it all. But it doesn't say how they did it. They told you. So it doesn't say anything to Yerushalmi. We're conjecturing. It's completely conjecture. The raya has nothing to do with it. The raya is that he took a less preferred wine because that worked better for him. That's what the raya that they bring us. But I'm saying to you is that we can understand that and say we can conjecture that by being mavashal it made it not the alcohol, which therefore didn't bother him. It doesn't have to be the pshat. I'm just if you're mavashal for long enough, you for sure will get all the alcohol out, and that's okay. And some of the more there's a sefer called Seder Pesach Chosei, who brings out the Chazon used to drink grape juice for the storm, and there's a Halicha Shlomo, which brings over things that Rosh Hashanah did, said that it's also fine for chayris if a person prefers that he should drink that. And within this question of, again, we're agreeing that it's chayris to drink the wine. We're talking about a person who has a preference. For him, it doesn't work well. Okay, he's not used to drink the wine. It doesn't work well. You have to just remember also, just in the bigger context of things, which is drinking daled kaises is a mitzvah drabanan. Drinking daled kaises derech chayris If you don't do it derech eretz, you're yotze b'diavad. The Gemara says you're yotze b'diavad even if you didn't do it derech eretz. On the other side is, for some people, drinking the wine and the effects that it has on some people, not everybody, on some people is so serious that it's going to affect all the other mitzvahs, the rice that they have to do that night. Okay, the person's got to sit there, they drink a cup of wine. If they say, after the first course, I'm out cold for the rest of the Seder, so he missed out on Sipri Situm sandwiches, mitzvah the rice. So it's just something you have to balance. Again, some people hold you could even do it completely, that's what you should do. That even itself beats out the cheres. But even if we're not going to say so strongly that it beats out the cheres in that way, and even if it's not as preferred, but you have to just then balance it and say, well, just because it's the first thing that I got to doesn't mean it's what I should choose. Maybe I should.
But how does Rabbi Yehuda?
So I want to answer like
But he just stopped. He stopped. No, he had no choice. The first years when he had only that kind of wine, he drank it, and he had no choice. He had to do it. He had to do it. But as soon as he had a choice, he switched. Yes, what's your question?
That might be good by the Dal Kosos, but if you look at the first coast, where you're making two dinim in there, there's the Kiddush Hayom and one of the coasts, what could be a deraisa on the Kiddush Hayom, especially this year with
Let's say
Shabbos being, so then there might be an afkamina of what I drink on that coast over the other three coasts.
Again, but if a person didn't do it derech eretz, derech eretz has nothing to do with Kiddush. So
Right, that's-
so being Kiddush is just fine without
You're
that.
saying it's the Rabban. You're saying the first guy's from the rice.
Might be a deraisa.
The derech eretz of that first course is not the raisa. The derech
The
eretz.
Kiddush Shabo is a deraisa.
Okay, so again, but if you're
It's
drinking,
yeah, you might not be right.
Kiddush
it's
Shabo.
very.
Oh,
I said it. You're right that I said it to the
Putting it on the table.
I have to tell you something. Even if it will be a deraisa, you still have to think about it. I have two mitzvahs deraisa. I'm going to do only one of them well. One of them I'm going to do the best way, and one I'm going to do in the not such best
Well,
way.
yeah, the first one that comes to your mind.
Okay,
That's
what's the
the
big
silent halacha, but
Okay.
what you gotta go
So,
through.
we're discussing two things over here.
Right.
Is it, are you not yotze at
Right.
all because it's not yain, or you yotze but it's not derech eretz?
Right.
No, this has Avengers, like 3.
Who's Avengers?
Yeah, go ahead.
So is there anybody that holds that,
Dog food.
anybody that holds you're not yotze?
No. There's no, even the first reason, which was that it's not considered wine if not that, even that reason, Rav David talks about it, just like you have to do because you pass on Rabbi Yehuda and you have to drink wine. But I'm saying to you, even within that, he doesn't say, well, what happens, is it b'diavad? Even within that, Rabbi Yehuda's other din of Mariyain, if for sure if you drink white wine. So, in other words, it's only, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mean it as you must do.
Nobody holds you're not yotze.
I don't think so. And the Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Kiddush that you could use wine, that you could use grape juice. It's a Gemara. So what is that saying to you? Either we don't pass on Rabbi Yehuda, or we pass on Rabbi Yehuda. Either we pass on Rabbi Yehuda, but it's only of preference, but not of it's. I don't think there's anybody who holds it united, and I don't think there's such a thing. Okay, if you guys have patience, we'll go to the other side. I don't think you have patience. If you don't have patience, I have time.
I once asked Rav Shai Yashuv, what did his father do on Pesach?
Okay.
Seder always bothered me. The Nazir. So what did he do at the Seder?
What's the potter?
So he said he took an apple and he just squeezed the juice out of the apple, and that's what he used for the delicacies.
Apple juice?
What's the difference
Just
between
pure.
Some of it. He didn't do grape juice. Yeah, they finished.
Okay. Interesting.
He told me that's what his father did.
I could take milk, you could take it.
Okay. He used that's for sure further down to use okay.
squeeze it on Pesach night?
That's not no, there's not to finish. No,
Should we go on or should we stop here?
Go.
We should go on. Okay, fine. It's a whole different topic. I mean, not related, but
How long will it take?
As long as you're going to be, that's what I'm asking.
okay, we'll stop. We'll do it.